Good afternoon and welcome to a Oak Harbor City Council workshop meeting. This is a regular meeting. Today is Wednesday, January 27th. It is 2 p.m. I'd like to call this regular workshop meeting to order. Due to COVID-19, there is no physical meeting location per Washington Proclamation 20-28. Today's meeting may be viewed live via YouTube and replayed on cable channel 10. In addition, the public may call 623-404-9000 and enter the meeting ID number, which is 149-766-1467, to listen to the meeting live. This is for audio only. Public comments are not usually taken at workshops. Council members and city staff are participating via teleconference. The staff sitting in council chambers are all physically distanced, at least 6 feet apart, and will be wearing masks when they are not speaking. Guests are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. I do have one quick announcement regarding Island County Public Health. I want to note that Keith Higman, Health Services Director for Island County, is holding a Facebook Live presentation this Friday, January 29th at 3 p.m. Keith will be discussing the COVID-19 vaccine in Island County. You can submit any questions you may have prior to the event by email to pubhealth, that's PUBHEALTH, at islandcountywa.gov. So this afternoon we have, I believe, 4 sections on our agenda, and we will be starting with our development services. And that discussion will be regarding our model home ordinance. And I think today for that discussion, we have our Director of Development Services, David Kuhl. Dave, I'm going to turn it to you at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll try and figure out how to share my screen. Okay. What I'd like to talk about today is the model home ordinance. A little background on the ordinance. Ordinance 1780 was passed and adopted back on November 15th, 2016. It was actually a pretty good ordinance that was adopted back then. We found that we had an occasion to use it when the Howards Point subdivision came into effect. And we found that we needed to put together a process to make it work. So we used a number of things that we innovated with. So it took us a little bit of time to make it work, but we did. And the Howards Point subdivision came together as far as a model home program in itself. So we have 4 model homes that are working out there right now. We just issued 4 model homes. That particular ordinance, though, requires all the infrastructure to be installed in front of the existing model homes before you can actually have a model home permit. So the challenge with that is that the development community is that they want something different. So we've seen a number of things that have come in from the development community, and they want more flexibility. So what we're going to talk about today is some options, and we'll see what you think about that and see if you want to go forward with the change. So what we've done is we did get feedback from the development community. We've been given copies of the City of Marysville's code. the City of Lake Stevens Code, and Snohomish County's code. So I've included those in your packet, and if you've had a chance to look through those, you can see those are typical code language, and we can certainly talk about those if you have any questions. The issue we have with the current existing ordinance that's in place is that the development community wants something that's faster. They would like the ability to install their model homes at the same time as the infrastructure is going in. So in other words, they would like to be able to be building roads and the other infrastructure at the same time that they're putting in model homes. So as you recall, as I was describing earlier, our code requires you to put in the roads, all the infrastructure, sidewalks, curb gutter, street lights, everything in front of the model home where the model home is planned to go before you can get a building permit. Whereas in their proposal, they want the ability to have everything happening all at once. So it's really the responsibility of the developer in that case to make it work. If we were to go forward with this kind of a process, it would require us to do a number of things, which is a text amendment in the ordinance. We'd create an ordinance just like one of these other cities, like Lake Stevens or Marysville. We'd go through a SEPA process. We'd go through a Department of Commerce notice, which is required by law. I think we could probably get an expedited 10-day review from the Department of Commerce rather than their typical 60-day review. We'd go through public hearing notices, and that's required by law. And we do public hearings with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So those are all the next steps we would go forward with if you want us to go forward with this. To give you a little more information, though, since the time that we got these codes, it was suggested that I contact some of these other agencies and find out what their success has been with these type of codes. When you have development going on all at the same time with infrastructure and model homes going up at once, do they have any problems? So I contacted a fellow that I know, the planning director in Lake Stevens, Russ Wright, and he said that they adopted their ordinance back in 2018. And he said since that time, they've had great success with their ordinance, and they've been very happy with it. And it's very similar to the other ones. They allow the infrastructure at the same time. They require a lot of the same things that we did in ours. And they allow a couple other interesting things. They allow a parking lot to be installed if that's asked for, so that people that are coming up to the model home have a special place to park. There's various different things that different agencies do with the number of model homes you can have. In this case, Lake Stevens allows, in a short plat, they'll allow 2 model homes. In a regular size subdivision, they'll allow 6 model homes, or 20% of the homes in the first phase. So there's a number of things you can do. There's no magic number for that, so you can create whatever number you want. Most times they seem to use the number 9, so we can create whatever we want, and you can talk about that, of course, in a public hearing or today, obviously. So I'm available for any questions you may have, and we're prepared to march on and go forward with whatever direction you provide. So I'm available for questions.
Okay, so we'll open it up then to the council at this time. Do we have all of council? I know we had at least 5. Okay, so far it sounds like we have 6 of our councilors out there, and I see now a hand from Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Cool, for getting this brought to the front and center and on the agenda. I guess I'm going to start by saying a couple of things that I've said in the past on this housing issue. It remains a concern for me, and why or when this came to my attention, why I wanted to get in front of the council so quickly. If we look back on the last couple of years, I'm not going to speak for all of the council, but I would say the majority of the council has expressed housing at all levels as a very urgent need in our community. And for me, it's the ultimate economic development driver. We have people that work here that live in other communities, and when they go back home to those communities, that's where they spend all of their money. So if they come here and spend 8 to 10 hours a day working, it'd be nice if they could not have to have that drive back over the bridge and be able to live here and spend that money here. So it's been something that's been very important to me, and I think the majority of my peers on council. I know, Mayor, when I worked on your Economic Development Committee in 2016, at that time, one of your stated goals was 250 new housing. We talked, I think, at that time, maybe single-family residences, and then later changed it in 2017 to 250 new residential building lots by the end of 2017. And so I don't think you've changed your mind on how important that is. But when I look, and all of my peers should have gotten an email with the updated numbers, when I look back over the last 5 years, we have done, and check my math if I'm wrong, but we've done 142 single-family residences in 5 years total. We've done 2 duplexes, so that should be 4. And then we've had 10, last year was a good year for apartments, but 10 total apartment complexes totaling 133 units. So, you know, those numbers are what they are, but to me, they're very anemic. And so I think that anything we can do, obviously within the law, and that's good for the city of Oak Harbor, but anything that we can do in our jurisdiction to help these developers get buildings up and off the ground, we should be doing. And it's a little frustrating, for example, even making this motion. I was not contacted by staff. You would think, council member makes a motion, what's on their mind? We'd like to know. Thankfully, I had a brief conversation with Jim Bridges. So Mr. Bridges, you must have communicated with Mr. Cool, and I know you've had conversations with at least one developer, so you got the gist of what the problem was. And I think we can fix it, and I think we should be able to fix it very quickly. So as Mr. Cool said, the challenge is in going through and getting more familiar with our model home permit application. When someone applies, it basically makes the assumption that all of the site improvements are in prior to the permit being applied for. And I guess in concept, I can see how that happened, but it really doesn't make any sense. If a developer brings a crew out to pour curb or sidewalk to bring in a road to those model homes, they probably want to be able to take that same crew and put in some foundations and not have multiple trips out there and a loss of time. We've heard Mr. Almberg in past years say, time kills projects. And I know probably every developer would echo that sentiment, that time is money and time kills projects. So I think this is a fairly simple fix with some minor updates that we can do. I went back, and I hope everyone else had a chance to watch the video that I referenced when we passed this. I want to read a couple of sentences, and I'll end with this. But if you go back and watch the video from 11/15 of 2016 when we approved this, Steve Powers, who is our Development Services Director, he led off the presentation. The slide that came up said the purpose of this ordinance is to allow up to 9 model homes to be constructed in new subdivisions prior to final plat approval. And that makes sense. That lines up with our current code. But he went on to say, and it's not very long, if you haven't watched it, please watch it. He said this would allow up to 9 model homes to be constructed in new subdivisions prior to the final plat improvements being complete and the plat accepted. And then he answers a question that Mr. Almberg asked a few minutes later. He says, these homes can get started while they are still finishing up the site work. And then answering a question for Councilmember Pagal at that time, he said, let's get these we can get these homes underway while they're still completing the site improvements. So I think the intent we probably had right, but now that we're into full-blown process and taking it through a larger development, I'm specifically referencing the hillside, there's some minor adjustments that need to be made so that we can get those homes being built and obviously make it as efficient as possible for the developer because that they can build homes faster. That's all I have at the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Servadius. And we'll turn to Councilor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, David. That was a great presentation. I am obviously relatively new to understanding these types of building ordinances, and reading the language of the codes is a little bit challenging. And so I wanted to ask you, in your history of working in development, do you see any real glaring advantages to doing infrastructure and working on the units at the same time? Or do you see some real, or have you experienced some real disadvantages from that type of system as we move forward? I agree with Councilmember Servadius, and I want to do whatever we can to streamline and make this process more efficient for everyone, both city staff and the building community. But I would like your input if there's advantages or disadvantages to doing both at the same time.
Well, I think it's probably going to be an advantage to the developer, obviously, because they'll be able to build everything all at once, and they'll get some speed out of the practice. And that's money is time, and time is money in this business. If they had to wait until they had the infrastructure in, it would cost them probably 6 months of time to have the infrastructure done first, depending upon what development is and how big the development is. So it would cost them some time, and they'd have to wait before they could start the construction. The liability really is on them because the city is really not the one that's in a libelous position. And what actually Grant Weed and Anna Thompson were working on before we started down this path was they were embellishing some of the bond language and some of the security language for us to make sure that it was clarified when they have to put in security to ensure the public infrastructure. And so we would probably add that back into the language that we have. We already have it in there, and most of these other cities have that as well. But I think they go on to define what bonds are and what it really means. And so we would probably just do that kind of language. And it's typical in all cities. So, but I see it as an advantage, certainly. The downsides could be, you know, what happened if something fails and something goes wrong and you have problems trying to move a lot of dirt on a hillside, and you have problems sometimes. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Thank you. No, that definitely, your explanation makes this a little easier to understand why we would want to move forward with something like this. And I'm happy to hear that Anna and Grant are working to make sure the city isn't held liable if that the responsibility does fall on the developer. And it sounds like, yeah, thank you. It helped me make my kind of mind up about how I want this to go forward. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Goebel. We'll go to Councilor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Cool, for that presentation. Councilman Servadius made a lot of good points. And this is so important because for most communities right now suffering from revenue shortfalls, there is not a better economic development driver than having some growth and having some construction and getting these developments off the ground. I have constituents, which are laborers, contractors, plumbers, electricians, drywallers. They're looking to go to work, whether amongst some of these developments. Now, and some of these people are ready to go. They're just waiting on the sidelines. These developments will create jobs for our local community. They will create revenues for our local community. And it's something that's very important that we get this thing fixed, and we get it fixed soon. I mean, good grief, look at these numbers. 2016, 39, 2017, 38, 2018, 52. What the hell happened in 2019 with 9 homes? Last year was 4 homes. Yes, we do believe that COVID came, but nevertheless, our staff and our elected officials, including me, we should have been on top of this. We should have kept this thing rolling. So This is something that we can do. We have the capabilities to do to fix this ordinance and to get these people rolling with these developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mack. We'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for Mr. Cool. Mr. Cool, if the SEPA is done when they put in for their plats and stuff, why it sounded like they had to do another SEPA study just for model homes? Why?
Oh, I can see why that's probably confusing. What we're talking about is doing a text amendment to the municipal code, and that's a separate process. So what we're talking about doing is a legislative act that is a change to the law, and that's what we're proposing to do in the model home section of the code under subdivisions, section 21-100. And so typically you always do a SEPA as part of that. It's not a big deal normally. It's a 14-day comment period, and it's just as part of the process. You do that when you've gone out to do your noticing, and so it doesn't slow anything down. And the biggest part of text amendments that take the most amount of time is actually your public noticing and your public hearing process. So typically you can get these done in 60 to 90 days, any code amendment you're working on.
Okay, I guess it's just, maybe it's the process. I mean, 90 days is 3 months, and all we're doing is tweaking what we've written. And I don't understand why 2 SEPAs have to be done when one has already been done. What's the second one on where the location of the model home's going to be makes a difference? I can see sending the text messages, hey, we just amended our code, blah, blah, blah. You've got this result from your SEPA study, da, 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 da. Why it takes 3 months that you have to redo that. I'm sorry, but you're paying twice in for 2 SEPAs that is exactly the same one you just had done. I don't get it. So can you explain that further? This just seems like, oh, well, now we're really bogging down the system. If you have to wait, I mean, once this text legislation has gone through, then it doesn't have to be done ever again. The project comes in and they do their regular SEPA review with their plat and plots and all that stuff. Usually that's done at the beginning before you even give them land clearing, I think. So I don't get this. Help me,
Right.
please.
What you're talking about, thank you for bringing it up. You're talking about the subdivision itself where they did a SEPA, and that was correct. And what we're talking about here is a governmental action where we're doing the text amendment, which is the municipal side, where we're doing the legislative action, and that's a separate, totally separate action. It's a similar topic. You have a subdivision going on the one side where they did a SEPA for a site-specific activity, and we're doing one for a text amendment that would cover the entire city. So this is just 2 separate actions, 2 separate processes, and it's a check the box kind of a thing. Wouldn't see a problem with it. So we want to make sure we go through all the steps and make sure we don't get challenged later by not following all the steps.
So this would just be a second SEPA just for the text legislation. It wouldn't be every time somebody wants to put in model homes.
Oh, right. Maybe I
The
wasn't
regular
clear.
one.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. It's just one time, just for this text amendment. So
Okay.
every time somebody does a model home, they'll just come in and get a building permit, go through our process and make sure that they check all the boxes, and then they can go through the model home process.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And this question is for Mr. Grant Weed. Grant, I believe you helped write both ordinances to comply with the law and everything for Marysville and Lake Stevens.
I did, and I can prove it by the amount of gray hair I have. I served as the city attorney for City of Marysville for 27 years, and then for Lake Stevens for approximately 15 years. And during those times are the times when both of those cities adopted their model home ordinances. So I did assist with either the review or drafting of their ordinances, and I'm fairly familiar with them.
Okay, my question is, Mr. Cool was recommending that we would put in language to safeguard the city. Seems like when someone's made a application for a plat to build, whether it's 4 homes or 200 homes, that there's a certain amount of security and deposit or bonding or whatever at that time. It sounds like they want additional bonding just for these model homes. Why are we adding, what's the purpose, or why are we adding more expense when the object is just to get the project going by having the infrastructure being built, making sure the fire department can get in there, they have fire hydrants already in place and some type of road. The homes are not hooked up to the utilities, could be, but they're just for showing the different models. It sounded like they were going to add another type of bond thing required. I guess I don't get it. It looks like you're double taxing them or double bonding them when it's not necessary, because you've already got the security that if the project stops or not finished or whatever. But if you could explain that, I would appreciate it.
Yes, very good questions. I think that the single biggest issue is it's in the city's best interest to protect against the occasion when we hit on tough times. When we go into a recession, you'll often find that plats that have been commenced don't get completed. And so cities can get left with partially completed plats without all the infrastructure, and as a result, final plat approval can't be approved, and hence the developer can't sell lots. And in tough times, even if you have final plat approval, lots become tough to sell. What we want to guard against is a developer that invests a significant amount in building model homes and then can't sell them. So the thing you'll find common in almost every city's model home ordinance is a requirement that the developer sign a hold harmless and an indemnification agreement with the city, so the city can't be held responsible for the loss of any investment by putting sums into model homes. And it makes sense, and I don't think any developer has a concern with doing that. It's part of the trade-off of being able to get a head start on marketing your product within a plat. Now, in terms of security and bonding, when a plat gets built, the water, sewer, stormwater, and street infrastructure all at the time of final approval gets transferred and conveyed in title to the city. And as a condition of that, almost all cities require a bond be issued, typically for up to 2 years, to ensure that the infrastructure is built as designed and doesn't have defects or flaws. Some cities, but not all, that have model home ordinances also require a separate bond if model homes are going to be built to ensure that they meet all the requirements of code. On that issue, I think you'll find some codes that require it and some codes that don't.
Okay, it just seems to me if they're doing a bond over the whole project, the infrastructure and all of that, so that the city doesn't get stuck with it, and they're going to want to sell eventually, I would assume, if they went to the trouble to build nice models to have someone live in it, that it wouldn't be necessary to have a bond just for those 3 or 9 model homes. It just seems like it's if the first bond works for the whole project, then I'm against requiring another bond just for those model homes. I think it sounds like we've got the safety in there, and we live on an island, and it's beautiful. It should sell itself, but it's hard to get labor to come here, I think we're penalizing if we were to do when you've head knob that we don't necessarily need. We don't have to have that second bond to still protect the city. The anonymity you were talking about, yes, definitely we need that so that we are held harmless if they don't. But anyway, those are my questions for now. Thank you very much.
So I notice our city engineer, Jim Bridges, would like to say something. Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is to, I think, kind of help clarify Ms. Munn's confusion. So the 2 bonds, the first bond is the performance bond, as Mr. Weed talked, to complete the physical improvements of the plat, the roads, the sidewalks, curbs, gutters, street lights, the water, sewer, all of that infrastructure. That's typically, so when a plat comes in and the developer builds it, all that infrastructure is built first, right? And they get to a point, it's complete, ready to accept, then the city becomes the owner, through the legal process. But there always is at some point a performance bond for minor things that may not be completed to help the developer get across the finish line. In this particular ordinance, the model home ordinance, what it wants to do is the developer has a preliminary plat, basically a paper plat. It means it can't be addressed, homes can't be sold, and so if the ordinance allows, the developer can post a bond for the construction of those physical improvements, so they can be completed, and then they begin working on them while he's simultaneously finalizing his plat. And then if he wants to put model homes on, the model home bond is a bond that is for 150% of the value of the cost of demolition of the home. So if the plat is not finalized and the homes are not finalized, then there's money to tear the partially constructed home down. It's only the demolition cost. So it's 2 separate bonds, 2 separate purposes. So the developer is not going to get a bond for the whole thing. He's got to get a bond for the physical improvements so they can be finished, constructed, and conveyed to the city. And then if he wants to do model homes, he's got a bond to possibly demolish the homes if the plat or the home is not finalized. Does that help out?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
So it sounds like these other cities have got that bonding requirement in also. Is that right, Grant? In the case that they don't finish one of the model homes, or excuse me, that they aren't able to finish it and sell those.
I would say I haven't checked a number of other codes, but I'd say you'll find a fair number that do have that bonding requirement, and certainly all of them have the indemnification agreement requirement. That was one of the pieces that Anna and I were working on most recently to be sure it's up to snuff and appropriate. So that piece of work has mostly been done and can be incorporated into any new code that the council wants to consider.
Okay, so we'll We'll move on then at this point to Councillor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a thumbs up. Thank you to Grant Weed and David Cool and to Jim Bridges. You've given excellent and very easily understandable answers to all of our questions, and just fantastic explanations thus far. In terms of next steps, my question is, on the slide you gave us, there were next steps in terms of the process, and I'm wondering, what do you need from us? Do you want us to take a look at the ordinances from other local communities, which I also really appreciate you including? Do you want us to take a look at that and give you feedback for what to include or exclude from the actual text of the ordinance, or do you pretty much have that in hand and you just need us to kind of give the head nod to move forward? What do you need from us?
Well, I think as a planner, I think if you just want to give us the go-ahead to go ahead and finish our research and kick the process off, we'll go ahead and write the ordinance and work together with the attorneys and craft any bonding language and make sure it's all up to snuff and start the process and get it advertised and send it to the Department of Commerce and do the SEPA notices, and then we'll start running it up the flagpole and move it forward.
Fantastic. I'm happy to leave it up to the experts. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Heisen. Councillor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, thank you all to all of staff for your detailed input. I think obviously you all have your answer based upon the feedback from the other counselors. I don't disagree with anything that any of them have said. I just want to make sure I guess we end this going back to a comment that Mr. Cool made, and I want to, I guess, put the proper spin on it. Time is money, money is time, right? In this business, and I'm talking about the business of city, right? The city business, City Hall, leading into a development such as the size of some of the developments we've got coming up. Staff have got literally hundreds and hundreds, and any of staff is welcome to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong in any of the statements I'm about to make. But staff in the city has hundreds and hundreds of hours invested in this, and by no means do the fees, the development fees and the plan review fees we've collected to date nearly cover the amount of time and energy we have into this. I mean, just for example, this meeting here, we've got staff, of course, being tied up, and we're going to have further staff's time involved in developing this ordinance, right? And the reality is the payoff for the city is twofold. One, we get paid off when the houses get built by supplying some much needed workforce housing that we have been saying, for the last 4 or 5 years now we need. And thank you to Mr. Servadius for gathering up having that information gathered up, because that just goes to show that what we think has been happening, in fact, has been happening, that we've had a sudden and dramatic slowdown during the downturn of 2009, and we have not even come close to building back up to development that we were doing prior to that. And so the payoff for the city is when these houses get built. The payoff for the city is through our development fees, our connection fees, our impact fees, our traffic fees. These fees don't get paid until these houses get built. So I just want to make sure that we all have that frame of mind. Yes, time is money and money is time in this business, the business of being a city. This is city money we're talking about. It's our constituents' money that we've invested into these developments, and we're not going to see the return to the city or its taxpayers until those fees are collected and these houses are built, right? So I just want to, wrap my statements up with, let's move along expeditiously. we're so close to the end on these that we can start seeing some revenue coming in for the city. At the same time, obviously, like Councilmember Mack pointed out, jobs, right? The jobs that are needed in the community. You know, on the backside of every recession, downturn, the housing industry, the housing starts, the electricians, the plumbers, the sheetrockers, the framers, those have helped bring us out of every one of those. And it's going to be important for us to stay ahead of the curve coming out of the backside of this pandemic. We're going to need those jobs to be created in our community. So time is money, and it's money for the city. And I just want to make sure that we've all got that frame of mind. This is, granted, this is a request to the developers, but this isn't as much about the developers as it is what the city needs to do in order to recoup its money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was reflecting on the CARES funding, and the statement that you said several times that made me smile, and I agree with you, was you've never seen government move so fast when we got those CARES funds distributed. Well, I'd like to challenge all of us to make sure the mayor can say that same statement again with regards to getting an update here on this model home ordinance so that we can get some houses being built. I don't think, I would ask staff that we try and run as much of this correctly, legally, but concurrently that we can. So if we need to expedite things to get this on a very upcoming council meeting, so that can at least start a public hearing, whatever those timelines are, whatever I think you said, Mr. Cool, there's a notice, a 14-day notice for SEPA, a minor adjustment that goes out, or a minor notification to the Department of Commerce. Let's try and do this in 45 or 60 days at the longest, not 90 or 120. I'm looking out my windows. We all probably have a window near us. It's sunny. There's good weather on the horizon here in a couple of months. It's a great time to be building houses. A couple of quick questions. I don't know if this is Mr. Cool, Mr. Weed, or probably one of you too. When we talk about those two bonds, the one in the permit that Mr. Bridges explained is if the model homes aren't complete and the plat never becomes final, it's to remove those. As a city or other municipalities, and that's private property, why do we remove those model homes? Are they an eyesore? As long as the soil is stabilized and the site is stable, who are we? I mean, obviously we're a municipality, but why do we tell private property owners what to do with those homes and whether or not to remove them? I understand the other bond that if they do get to a home being purchased, you don't want to have 3 people sitting in there that bought homes and nothing else gets completed. So I understand that performance bond to protect the end user, not so much the city. I mean, obviously the infrastructure has to be completed, but to protect those end users. But coming back to that first one, does it really matter to us if that plat does not become final and there's a model home sitting there? So that's the question. And I'll end with this. As we draft this language, can we relate things around occupancy? I think right now you can occupy up to one of those 9, and I could be wrong, one of those 9 model homes, but it seems like we can make a lot of these conditions subject to occupancy. So you could let a developer get started and be working through simultaneously some of this infrastructure and model home construction, but nothing can be occupied until a couple of benchmarks are met. And that would give us a little more assurance it has to be completed. Otherwise, the developer has no product to sell. If you can't occupy a home, you can't sell it. So thoughts on those? I don't know if it's Mr. Weed or Mr. Cool.
Just one thought I might offer is if a developer is unable to complete a plat and get final plat approval, any homes and even any lots that do not have homes cannot be sold and conveyed. You don't have a lot that can be sold until you get final plat approval. I think it's a really extreme situation where there might be model home or homes built and a plat does not get completed. What the city is left with is a vacant structure that can't be occupied, can't be sold. So over time, it could become a blighted situation, an invitation for homeless, invitation for various problems associated with homes that sit for a period of time and are unoccupied. So that might be part of the consideration in terms of requiring a bond, that if over a period of time the house needs to be removed because the plat isn't going to be completed, you have a way to cover the cost to be able to make that happen. But I would add a second time, it's probably an extreme situation. Usually what we experience when we hit times of recession is that plats may stay uncompleted for a period of time, but as recovery occurs, banks or other developers buy the plat, complete it, and then go back to the business of marketing the product. And so I think it would have to be some considerable period of time before there was a pressure laid to bear to actually remove a home, but it is conceivable, I suppose.
Thank you. And then whether you want to comment or not, or at least please keep it in consideration with regards to a subject of occupancy as a condition to make sure that some of these standards are met when you draft the language. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We'll move to Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm still wrestling, Mr. Weed, with this extra bonding. As Councilman Servadius said, the developer owns the land, and you have a model home, let's say 2 completely finished but not hooked up to utilities, and 1 partial, and then they stop finishing that. It is on private property, and I'm guessing that that model home is safer because it's newer, done by certain regulations, than a boarded up, burnt out firehouse that used to be in Oak Harbor for, I don't know, could be as much as 30 years. And it sat there as a blight. Who knows who broke into it to seek refuge or not, or old barns that ended up collapsing, and we don't demand that they do something with that. I'm just thinking it's that extra money for that required bonding at 150% for demolition, which would be cheaper than the price of the whole homes, could be used towards finishing that infrastructure or actually selling and then constructing a real house. I'm still having a little bit, I guess I would be curious in your research, Mr. Cool, how many cities that have model homes require the demolition bonding and which ones don't? Just because. And the ones that don't, obviously they must not have ever had any problems. And if the other ones do, I mean, I don't know. I still see it as a double charge, but I could be wrong. And it's not our property. And I don't know, some of the framing and houses look a lot better than some real homes in town that aren't ever kept up. So just, I'm curious. Thank you.
I don't have that information with me right now, Mayor Pro Tem, but I can get that.
I understand. It's just a question I'm saying before you. Could you at least kind of let us know who has and who hasn't? And if most of them haven't required it, then why do we see the need to push through when Mr. Weed has said that, yes, some do require it and some don't? If there's some way that both sides can achieve what they need to achieve, I guess. So I do not expect you to have the answer, sir. You've gotten a lot of them done today, you and your staff. I'm just, and I appreciate Mr. Bridges' comments. I just having a little bit hard time when we keep expecting businesses or construction or whatever to pay more and more and more just because we want that extra insurance, if it's not really necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We'll move to Councilor Goebel.
Sorry, I forgot to take my hand down. I apologize.
No problem. Councilor Mack?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Council Member Munns, Mayor Pro Tem Munns. I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around this second bonding. I don't see it here on Marysville Municipal Code. It's fairly straightforward and simple. You know, everybody's got to keep something in mind here. We want to be assured, reassured, and more insured, and reassured again. What the hell do you think these developers are going through? How much stretching can they do? How much risk are they taking with putting something in the ground, putting infrastructure in, and then the way the market is so volatile right now, what are they going to come out? What guarantees do they have of getting their dollars back? So we got to get realistic with some of this, who needs to be covered and who needs to be insured and reassured that someone won't go through. Now, here's just a suggestion and recommendation, Mr. Weed. Why can't we establish some type of time frame on this? How about 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 48 months down the road? If these are a problem, then perhaps there needs to be in that language that the developer has to step in and then pay that second bonding then. So let's get realistic. Let's get creative here. And I also agree with Beth Munns. I've looked for some pretty sad eyesores in this town for 30 years, and not a damn thing was done about it. But yet we're requiring someone with brand new, has a hell of a product, a good looking product, a stable product, and something that will set the standard for Oak Harbor for many years to come, and where these young military people and retirees could use some quality homes. And we're futzing around with that we want to be reassured. Well, let's take another look at this and let's get realistic. I think Maryville has a real clean, straightforward approach, and that could be why they're building a lot of homes. So again, I'm against his second bonding. If he's bonding the whole entire plat and he's got the finances with that first bonding, I think that should be sufficient. But yes, we still want to go with the law and that type of thing. So, but again, we can't get choosy when some of these other developments are falling apart and some are possibly being sold. So let's be careful that we don't have a hillside that just someone walks away and it's vacant and it stays that way for God knows how many years. So let's all do our part, and I agree with Councilman Servadius. Let's expedite this. Mr. Cool, you're in charge. Let's see what we need to do tomorrow morning and start moving forward with what we need to do. It sounds like all the council is pushing it, and the council will remain steadfast in moving this thing forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mack. We'll move to Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, I don't want to drag this out any longer than necessary, but I want to make sure that we're all having the same conversation. In terms of the second bond, I thought it was pretty clearly explained that it's for a completely separate purpose than the original one, because if the final plat doesn't get approved, then the model homes, which are initially just built as examples, they're not legal buildings and cannot be legally occupied or sold. So it doesn't make any sense to leave them up and try to occupy them. And I want to make sure I'm on the right page here and I understand that correctly. That seemed pretty clear to me. So could someone clarify that for me? Thank you so much.
Yeah, Mayor, can I jump in, please? So,
Yes.
you know, from a standpoint of, assurance, a hold harmless, So essentially what you're allowing, and I'm not for it against it, I'm just pointing this out, is, in my industry, it's called an attractive nuisance, right? Kids are going to go play there, potential injuries can occur. And so you want to eliminate that hazard. And I'm not sure the hold harmless indemnification in the ordinance would cover that. And granted, it is private property. As far as comparing it to a 30-year structure that's been allowed to stand, with all due respect to the council and the elected officials everywhere I've worked for, it's a matter of political will to take action on those structures instead of hold this plat or a next plat to the same condition. Well, we've allowed it for 30 years, we'll allow it again for another 30 years, regardless of going forward. At some point in time, you've got to stop and you've got to rectify a wrong, right? And that's from my standpoint, that's from my point of view. And I'm not advocating for a bond. I'm just pointing out the facts that there is a potential for injury. Rebar is sticking up out of concrete foundations. I played on them when I was a kid. Growing up in Vancouver, Washington, we'd hit every subdivision there was and ride our bikes around. We'd get hurt. No one ever say anything because that's what we did it back in the 60s. But nowadays, it's a pretty litigious society. And then you're also dealing with the potential absentee owner at that point in time. So if things go belly up, and I'm not talking about any one particular plat, but if things go belly up and that owner goes away, then who's going to step in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months from now on an unfinished house? Then when we come knock and say, hey, you never finished, you got to tear it down. So I'm just pointing that out. Again, I'm not advocating one side or the other. I'm just, that's my point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Councillor Servadius. I can't hear you.
Thank you, Mayor.
There we go.
I'm not a developer, but Ms. Heisen, the model homes, at least as I understand it, with regard to the hillside, and I think this is very consistent. I remember when they were building Fireside and what's the new one over there by the golf course, Fairpoint, something. The model homes will be sold. They're usually sold last. So they'll be developed as all the street, sidewalks, infrastructure is going in. Obviously, they have water and sewer. They have to be sanitary. But those homes, they're not torn down or moved off site like a double wide or something. It might be a sales office. They're actual homes that display the different models, the different finishes that a person could select. And then they will be eventually probably some of the last homes sold in that development. And our code actually talks about the removal and how long they could stay there if the final plat is not approved. But I think if that helps clarify that, they will be finished homes that are eventually sold. And please correct me, Mr. Bridges, Mr. Cooley, you've been around this a lot longer than I have, if that's not correct.
No, I think that's well stated.
Okay. The challenge is on now to get this done sooner rather than later. We heard you loud and clear. Good luck, Mr. Cool. If you're not on the program, maybe you want to leave the meeting and get started on that. I'm not a joke. We hear you loud and clear, and I'd like for staff to do that also as quickly as possible. Thank you. We will move on now to I think our next section, which is under finance. We have two items. The first is a report on the use of CARES funds. I'd like to preface the report with thanking our staff and Island County and disclosing again to council that the public that this was a complicated and detailed undertaking. The CARES funding entailed receiving funds from multiple entities, creating a small business grant program, multiple community support programs, modifying city facilities to meet new L&I requirements, all while complying with county, state, and federal auditing standards. And we did this in a 6-month time frame, actually. Today's staff will present three different, we'll have an introduction and overview by our finance director, Mr. Goldman, We'll also have Sandra Place, our Central Services Supervisor, talking about the city's use of CARES funds. And then Sabrina, our Public Information Officer, will speak about the North Whidbey Island Small Business Relief Program. After today's workshop, our city clerk, Julie, will email this presentation to you, council. Please, if you can, hold your questions until Sabrina's done, if possible. But let's start off then with introduction and overview. David Goldman.
All right, good afternoon, Finance Director David Goldman. Can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the CARES Act was passed by Congress back last year on March 17th. It was about a $2.2 trillion act. 150 billion of that money was meant for state and local governments. And local governments received the funds directly from the feds if they had a population of 500,000 or more. Island County and Oak Harbor received the funds as subrecipients to the Washington State Department of Revenue. So this is a flow chart, came from the feds, went down to the Washington State Department of Commerce, and some funds went to Island County, and some of those funds came back to us, or some funds came directly to us from the Department of Commerce. So the total amount of CARES funds awarded was $1.4 million last year. About $366,666 and no cents came from Island County. We tried real hard to get another 2 sixes here, 66 cents, but they just put their foot down and said, no, we're going to keep it as no cents. I'm sorry, that's a bad joke. I'm sorry. And then the Department of Commerce gave us 2 tranches worth about $1 million there. We spent about $1.1 million by the deadline, or the November 30th deadline that the Department of Commerce put out, leaving about almost $300,000 unspent. Most of the Island County funds were spent, and about 297,000 is left over from the direct funds from the Department of Commerce. So about half of the $1.4 million was used for the Whidbey Island Small Business Relief Program. About 284,000 of the total 711,000, about 284,000 or 40% was left unspent by the deadline. Of the other half of the $1.4 million, about 48%, that went for direct city CARES expenses. And most of those funds were spent. Only about 2 or 3% was left over, about $13,500 right there. So on December 31st, on New Year's Eve, Congress passed a bill that included a year-long extension to the December 30th, 2020 deadline to spend that $150 billion allocation for state and local governments. We've been contacting the Department of Commerce. We haven't heard back from them about, if they're going to be allowing an extension of their November 30th, 2020 deadline. So we can go ahead and utilize the rest of those funds to help out small businesses or whatnot. As soon as we find out if they're going to extend the deadline or what they're going to do with those funds, we will definitely let the council know. So the eligible costs for these funds are, obviously it has to be connected to the COVID-19 emergency. The expense must be necessary. The expense is not fulfilling a shortfall in government revenues. However, that doesn't apply to the Small Business Relief Program. That's just if we're using it for direct government expenditures. And the expense is not funded already through another budget line item, allotment or allocation, as of the March 27th, 2020 state of the budget. That's basically supplanting. That's a no supplanting clause that they put into the CARES Act. And finally, this is similar to number 1 and 2, the expense wouldn't exist without COVID-19, or the expense would be for a substantially different purpose, or wouldn't be for a substantially different purpose. So saying all that, I'd like to turn this over to Sandra Place to talk about the city's use of the CARES funds in more detail.
Thank you, David. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, as David presented, the Department of Commerce provided relief funds for local governments. Today, I'll be talking about the $689,100 available for the city of Oak Harbor to use to cover our expenses for the COVID-19 emergency. I'll begin back in April of 2020 when the department heads were asked to put together a list of items that were needed due to this pandemic. Those items were evaluated by a team based on the 5 statements as David explained. In order to qualify, the city's team needed to answer yes to all 5 of these statements. Once that was done, the procurement began. All procurement rules and policies were followed as if we were doing any other purchase. This slide breaks down the expenses by subcategories as reimbursed by the Department of Commerce. The expenses were tracked in our project accounting module using a special project code called CARES 20, and staff even broke it out even deeper with subcategories as shown on this slide. The first items that we purchased were teleworking and PPE for our staff. Some of these items were 27 Microsoft Surfaces, 54 webcams, and 2 VPN servers. This next slide shows a picture of some of the PPE that was purchased. This is just some of it. There was quite a bit purchased. Many gallons of sanitizers. We even purchased from a liquor store and bottled the sanitizer ourselves. We purchased over 100 gallons of bleach, over 100 gallons or containers of wipes, 350 boxes of gloves, and those are just to name a few items. It was like Black Friday shopping, I'll tell you. Every day we were checking to find if we could get what we could get, and it was whoever got there first got it. We were able to apply for and granted access to Amazon's COVID-19 group, which allowed us to receive items at lower prices, and it gave us way more availability. This slide shows the amount that the city was reimbursed for finance department staff to help respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency. This slide shows the amount the city was reimbursed for the fire department staff to help respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency. This slide shows the beginning of the public safety measures that city staff implemented in April of 2020. First, we installed plexiglass at City Hall for the utilities office. We also purchased stanchions, and we have tape and stickers on the floor to encourage citizens to stay at a safe distance from the staff, as well as the safe distance for themselves. In addition to these purchased items, staff implemented low-cost or no-cost measures, such as taking separate vehicles, reduced in-person visits with clients and vendors. We moved workstations further apart, and we moved all of our in-person meetings onto our Ring Central platform. At this time, staff installed many hand sanitizer stations throughout the city and added on additional cleaning and sanitizing for high-touch areas. This next picture shows plexiglass that was installed downstairs by our own staff at City Hall. The Department of Labor and Industries created a document called the Coronavirus COVID-19 Prevention, and one of the mandatory items was to social distance. It called for the use of barriers when social distancing was not feasible. So this project began in August of 2020. It's at the center, and it shows that we expanded the front entryway, and you can see the partition between both of those workstations to allow for social distancing once the center reopens. Initially, we just had the plexiglass sitting on top of the counters. This slide shows, adding to the last slide, that L&I further defined working alone conditions to a worker inside of a cubicle with 4 walls, one with an opening, that are high enough to block the breathing zone of anyone walking by. So these next 2 slides show modifications that we did for staff to create safe working environments. And this is for downstairs City Hall, and this one is also downstairs City Hall. Then we move upstairs City Hall, where we did some more modifications for 3 staff members to create a safer working conditions for them as well. And then before this particular project with the modular was presented to City Council, staff researched with 3 different vendors if our current cubicles could be rearranged to allow for social distancing. Where space was gained, other space was lost. And that is why on October 6th, City Council was asked to approve the purchase of this Public Works Annex based on the 5 criteria I mentioned before to create a safe space to be able to social distance for the city's engineering staff. And that one picture is the outside, the other one's the inside. The project began the next day after October 6th and was completed in 7 weeks, and it was truly a team effort. This last slide shows two software programs that the city purchased in response to COVID-19. One is the Zen City, which is used by all departments to allow staff to track and understand the impacts from the pandemic, as well as understand our residents' needs and priorities. The second one is called, is used at the center, and it's called Civic Rec, and it's to aid in virtual recreation management and communication for their program. At this time, I will now turn the remainder of the presentation over to the city's public information officer, Sabrina Combs.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. So first off, I just want to talk about the dollars that were part of this program. And so when speaking about the dollars, we had $501,000, just over $501,000 that we set aside for the 83 applicants that were approved for receiving the small business grant program. Of those, 63 businesses completed the process. 20 did not complete the process, and that was a little over $147,000 based on our estimations from their applications. And they did not complete the process because they were disqualified, they withdrew, or simply went out of business during the pandemic. So we also spent some additional funds on helping out small businesses with other services and features, and those costs were $40,000. And some of the things that we did to provide that were providing personal protective equipment. When we did the business applications and we talked to other businesses in the area that did not qualify for that program, some of the things that they told us were the things that they really needed. And some of those items were personal protective equipment around masks, stickers for their floor, signage, disinfectant, sanitizer for your hand pumping sanitizer. So we worked with our internal team of Stand in Place and just really got together and came up with a quick list and a survey that we could put out. Jay ran that program as part of the CARES program assistant. And we asked businesses to complete the form if they wanted to receive those items. The Chamber helped broadcast that information as well. And so the first round, we got a couple of responses, and then we heard that more businesses wanted it. So we sent it out again, and we ended up with over 20 responses. And so Jay went around and distributed these materials to these businesses, and they really appreciated it. Next, at a council meeting, as the grant was wrapping up after the extension, we received a request from council about doing more. And so again, the team got together and said, what can we do? How can we help these businesses get more assistance? And one of the things we realized is, unlike some of our neighboring cities, we didn't have a quick reference resource for giving out information about our businesses, and not just a business directory, but more about what are the businesses that are open and beyond just restaurants. So what we built was the Support Oak Harbor Businesses website, and we also built a card that went with it. And mailing out the card that I'm going to show you on the next slide, we got over 1,082 visits really quickly after we got the site up and got this mailer out. And recently, you might have seen in your mail this week, there was a new card that went out, and that new postcard went out to remind people about it. And we got another couple of hundred visits right after that card went out to mailboxes. So people are looking at it, they're seeing it, and it's helping get the information out for businesses. One of the delays in getting the website up was simply that Jay was doing the work to contact these businesses and make sure the list that we received from economic development and from the chamber, the businesses we were listing on the site were in fact open, were available for business, and we were giving the most recent and correct information out to the public. Lastly, I just want to say, Jay received a lot of people saying, thank you for your help, thank you for your assistance as we went through this process. But the biggest thing was for us to receive letters from businesses saying that they really appreciated the work that we did. So China City and I Support the Girls actually sent us direct letters thanking us for the work and the assistance that these grants provided. Right now, we are currently running surveys. We have about 12 responses so far, where we are asking businesses how this process went, what we could do better in the future if a process like this were to exist. And we're seeing some really positive feedback from our business community. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Sabrina. So we'll turn to City Council. I see Councilor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. And Sabrina, As a business owner here locally, I would really like to extend my thanks for all the effort you and your staff put forward. What was really interesting is how many customers commented, and just shoppers in general, that due to the situation and businesses closing and having a tough time, they wanted to do their part and shop local. Also, it was nice to see it on the big reader board in Big Smith Park. Now, and looking at all this and the way it really worked out, and being in business for many, many years here, this is one of the first times that it's gotten so extensively about just support everybody local, regardless of what type of business they have. It's really important, and frankly, in my opinion, it needs to continue in some way, shape, and form. Has to be cost effective, both in time and materials and expense, but it needs to go. People are liking it. They see the results of it. Everybody appreciates it, and again, a job well done, and let's keep it going the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say, Councilmember Mack, one thing that I really appreciated is the teamwork, not only with our city staff, but with the chamber. And the chamber is also doing some really great videos to engage with the public that highlight individual businesses and how they coped in 2020 and what they're doing in 2021. And I highly recommend that people go check those out on Facebook.
Yes, I've always been a longtime supporter of the chamber, and I apologize for leaving them out, but yes, Vicky's doing a great job. And yes, it takes everybody involved, the city, the chamber, the business community, and the support of the community. So thanks to all.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Mack. Seeing no other questions at this time, thank you, staff, for your continuing hard work in this area. Thank you. Then we'll move on to item number B under finance, which is enterprise resource planning, ERP overview, and permitting software. I think we have our finance director, David Goldman, again.
Yes, sir. So can everybody see the screen that says enterprise resource planning?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
Yep.
Thank you. So ERP overview. So the number one question that I get from everybody throughout the city or people that I just, talk to about, software solutions is, what is an ERP? And it all just boils down to a software system that integrates everything we do in the city as much as possible, like the finance, purchasing, billing, payroll, timekeeping, permitting, just everything we do integrated into one system, or a system that at least is able to share data. The software, it's designed around your processes or procedures, and it might actually have features that will improve your processes and procedures too. And you can use the software directly from the vendor, or if you have a piece of software that works great and the vendor software for that particular module doesn't seem like it's going to work as good, you could connect the databases together so they share information. But I just figured, rather than me try to explain it, I went online and looked all around the internet for videos about what an ERP is, and most of the videos I found are sponsored by the vendors, so they're biased towards their own product. But I was able to find a quick 1.5-minute video that's neutral as I could possibly find it that I'd like to play. So let's hope it works. Where did I put that video there? So I put that over here. All right. Did the screen switch to this video? Investopedia?
Looks like it, yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. All right, let's hope this works. All right, here we go.
Enterprise Resource Planning, ERP, is a management software that integrates a business's essential departments. Think of ERP as the glue that binds different computer systems within a large organization. Any large corporation has several essential departments, including planning, purchasing, sales, marketing, finance, human resources, and more. ERP software each department to share information and processes with others throughout the entire organization. Each can access the same data at one central location, which greatly simplifies business processes. For example, a large company's purchasing and accounting departments can find the same information they need to make sure their efforts and numbers synchronize. Or a company's order management team can receive accurate input from sales in real time to expedite product delivery. Traditionally, each department would have its own system optimized to handle its particular tasks. With an ERP, each department still has its own system, but it can communicate and share information easily with the rest of the company. ERP software facilitates collaboration across business units. As ERPs become more popular, large software applications have been developed to help companies implement them within their organization. On the downside, ERPs can be expensive, and they can be difficult to manage or tailor to an organization's needs.
All right. So did the sound come through?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I just thought that would be a nice 1.5 minute simple video that just kind of shows the basics of what an ERP is. And the next few slides, we'll get into a little bit more details, and especially how it relates to Oak Harbor. So the main benefits that I found with reading all the material is to speed up and improve our processes, to share information organizational wide in an efficient manner, to reduce paper and chances for losses and errors, for enhanced financial and capital project reporting, and an enhanced customer experience. So some examples that I found just by talking to different departments, department directors, and folks who work in the departments, and my own staff, about things that we do in Oak Harbor that would be able to be optimized. For example, reduces or eliminates manual processes and errors. For example, finance we receive paper copies and receipts from the Marina system, and then we get all this paper, and then we manually enter the information into the accounting system. If we had a system that connected up to each other, they could enter all the information right from the get-go, and then we'd just be able to see it in our system, and it would eliminate a step or a couple steps and potential for errors when you re-enter the information or translation errors and all that, because you have different systems. It automates and speeds up approval workflow, and eliminates and reduces paper. Currently, we get paper purchase orders and invoices, which are inter-office to us from different departments. Those need to be reviewed in order and then routed to the next person and then stored in a paper file. If things were connected up, they could be entered directly in by the departments. The departments can enter the backup documents into the system, scan them in, and then we'd be able to, not just finance, but anybody who has the appropriate security access would be able to see those documents as they relate to what they need to do for the workflow and approval process. Additionally, scanned paper documents, like I said, they'd be easily accessible in the system to be viewed during their approval process, but also viewed years later as needed. I mean, right now we have to go downstairs sometimes and try to find where a document is, in the storage room, and it's in these boxes, and some of these documents have been sitting around for a long time. It takes time to do that, and it'd be a lot easier if they were all scanned in and put in some kind of system where it could be a lot, indexed and everything, where it can be, found a lot easier. Now our customers for, permits, utility accounts, classes over at the senior center, mortgage, business licenses, and so on, they'd be able to go online to see their payment history, to see their usage history, if we have that data, available. They'd be able to look at invoices, make payments, and just see all that online. Like when you go to, the electric company, you can kind of see a history of everything. And, that would be one of the benefits of enhanced customer, visibility on their own accounts, and ease of payments, and ease of getting frequently asked questions and help when they need it. They have questions on their accounts and so on. Currently, our capital plan is manually created. So when we have to make those adjustments during budget season or throughout the year, it's pretty time consuming to revise. If we're able to have it in a system, we could make the changes just once, and it just will cascade throughout the whole document, and then be able to revise a lot quicker. We'd be able to better allocate staff labor hours related to capital projects via an enhanced payroll module instead of the time-consuming manual process that we currently do right now, where we try to figure out everybody's time and the kind of figure out how to allocate it towards the different projects. We can just have it directly as part of when we're coding the time of everybody, even if they're salaried employees, we could still code their hours to, if they were working a few hours on a particular project, we could at least code it to that project so we're able to track approximately how much staff time and labor went into a capital project. And we could also have, electronic timesheets with program pay codes instead of using manual input and then doing some geo linkages. Some of this stuff is kind of internal to what we do, but these are all time savings. And there's more examples out there too. I just wanted to keep it to 2 slides. But these are all just time savings and efficiencies that we can, that an ERP would be able to help out with. So there's some myths out there. They're just floating out there about ERP softwares, and someone who's went through an implementation and kind of a re-implementation somewhere else. I'd just like to call out some of these myths. Some folks think that an ERP will, automatically improve our organization's processes with like little effort. It will just be like a magic wand. You plop it down and everything will improve. And that's just not how it works. I mean, we have to get together as staff and all the departments and just figure out what all the processes are and figure out if they're the most efficient ways of doing things and how they would be able to work with this new software, how we can make things work a lot smoother. Also, an ERP will work perfectly out of the box and we won't have to customize it. I mean, some of these software vendors have hundreds of different clients, maybe thousands, and they have a system that's good, but they don't know how your particular organization's processes work. So it's important to ensure that when we're going through the implementation phase, that we're able to customize it to meet our work requirements so that we're using it to its fullest potential. Number 3 there is, the ERP will require, little or no training. All new software programs require training, especially something as, large and organization-wide as an ERP. And we want to be able to have the vendor provide training up front, but also have them train the trainer so that there's folks in-house who, when a new person comes on board, or if somebody hasn't used a function for 3 months and they forgot how to use it, they can sit down with them and just talk to them and kind of walk them through it. So, training is very important to make sure that, whatever investment we end up doing is successful. Number 4 is the same thing with in-house support. I mean, the vendor is going to know how their system works, but they're not going to know your business processes. And it's important to have someone on board who is an organizational person who knows about, the business processes organization-wide, or at least as best as possible organization-wide. So we can call up and work with the vendor when things need to be changed or tweaked or whatnot. We just need to make sure we have in-house support to ensure that this big investment is successful. And also, the more expensive and the more functions that the software has, it's got to be better, right? But that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's no reason you get a piece of software, and if we're not going to use half the functions, this is going to confuse people. They're going to see these functions up there, and they're going to get confused with all the buttons and everything. If we don't need that, and we're not using it, we're not King County or the state of Washington. We're definitely not going to need something that's that extensive. We just need something that works for Oak Harbor. So here are some of the steps that we need to go through to select an ERP. First, we need to develop a list of the software that we have now, which we've already started doing this. We just need to figure out what the current software we have does and which departments need to use it and what processes are connected to that software. And from that list, we develop a list of functional areas that we currently use, like the general ledger. That's an accounting thing, but general ledger, budgeting, project grant accounting, permitting, billing, timekeeping, so on. Just all the different modules that we're going to need, all the functional areas. And then if there's stuff that we currently don't have that we'd like to have, we need to include that, in the ERP write-up as well. So once we develop those key functional areas, we got to build specifications for each functional area for the bidders to bid on, so we can evaluate how each software is compared to the specifications that we put out for each module. And there's some examples. MRSC has some examples, and I've seen some examples in other cities we can use to do that. Then we go out for an RFP, for the ERP vendors. We get them back. Staff would review the responses, and we, ask for demonstrations so they can show us each functional area and folks from various parts of the city who use those functions would be there to kind of ask questions and, just figure out if this is a good piece of software for the city or not. Then we'd go and we'd score and we'd rank the proposals, and then we'd bring those proposals, the top ones, and we provide the features, for the city council with presentations to show you what the software looks like, especially when it comes to what the customer is going to see, because they're the ones who are going to be, the folks outside the city who interact with the city, or they're going to be real important. We got to make sure that it's that what they see is user friendly and that it makes sense from a public point of view. If we're going to be looking at 3 or 4 different ERPs, we got to make sure it has a good public face so that folks understand, all the improvements that we're doing with this. And then from that and from all the presentations, the city council votes on the selection of it. The last slide I got before we move on to permitting, I got this quote out of a recent article in the Government Finance Review magazine. In today's market, they're saying that most projects that fail, most of these ERP implementation projects fail, not because of the software, but it's really because of a bad implementation. So it's vital, that we map all of our existing business processes, look for improvements. I mean, the preference is when we're looking at the ERPs, which ERP meets our business processes the most. Now, some are going to be close, but they might not meet everything that we offer, but they also, we'd like to look for improvements too. If there's something that we didn't think of, but the 400 clients that, this software program, the software company has, they all gave feedback to the software company, and they've taken all that input and optimized the process, and it works for us and it improves things. We'd like to see that too. So we don't want to necessarily just say only our processes. We want to be able to, leverage that if we can. We also need to develop a full project plan. We got to have we got to schedule sufficient time for all the critical tasks in that project plan to get done before we just go live. I mean, we got to make sure that the old data in our current system is converted and it works in the new system, so we can have a history, especially when it comes to accounting and reporting and auditing. Got to make sure we have that history in the new system. Got to make sure that if we're keeping a piece of software or multiple pieces of software, we got to make sure it connects and we test it and make sure that, if somebody enters something in this module over in another department, this, the information comes over and we're able to, another area is able to use it. And communication is key. I mean, we need to ensure that we continually create a culture that's inclusive, that's open to discussing new ideas from across the organization, right? Everybody, from someone who's been here to 20, 30 years, someone who just started 6 months ago, everybody's important. I think it's important to hear from everybody, all levels, directors, managers, all the way down to folks, who are line workers. Everybody needs to be, listened to and heard, and their input needs to be taken into consideration, because we want to make sure that whatever we develop, if we decide to move forward with the ERP, is successful, and that we, have a good return on the investment that, we'll be making, and if we go forward with this. The next slide is all David Cool. He's going to handle the next 4 or 5 slides, talking about permitting software and what he's found and where we're going to go from here. David Cool.
Dave Cool, are you with us?
Better turn on my microphone. That would help. Thank you. Thank you. So the goals of the permitting process are to speed up the review process and to provide a great customer interface. The third goal is to ensure that relevant data is captured in the system so that it can be used throughout the organization. The permitting system update for you. Thank you again, Council, for approving the permitting system in the budget this year. I wanted to give you a brief overview of where we are with the system. It's January. We're currently reviewing concepts with vendors. And so it's an unofficial process where we are seeing demonstrations from vendors online. We've seen about 4 of them so far. And we're using a variety of different staff members to sit in on these demonstrations to see what concepts are available, what different techniques that these vendors use. And we're getting feedback from staff to see what they like and what they think are not necessary. From that, we're going to develop specifications that we'll be looking to put in our request for proposal. And then we'll bring finalist vendors in after we put this RFP together. So we'll probably get the RFP out in February. And then we'll probably see presentations towards the end of the month. And then from there, we'll select a vendor to provide for you as council with a recommendation. From there, we'll develop a contract and present that again back to you, to council, to approve. And then once we have the contract in place, we'll develop a workflow with that vendor and go through all of our processes we currently do to see where we can find efficiencies in review of permits, review of land use processes, how we route projects to engineering, all those kinds of steps, and make improvements. So that's what we hope to do with this process. Some of the specifications that we'll be looking for that we want out of our vendor are, the first one is data migration. And what that is taking your old permitting system and transferring that to your new permitting system. When I was in Woodinville, we worked with a vendor to do that, and that was probably the biggest cost of the entire system. So each vendor does it a little differently, and it depends upon what you currently have. In Woodinville, we had a really archaic system, and so hopefully it's not going to be that expensive here. We'll just have to wait and see. Also, we'll be looking for training and product support. That's very important. We want to make sure that the vendor is there to help support us through the process. We'll want to look at something that is cloud-based so that we can get all the technology capability we can. All of you have probably used dashboards throughout your work online, and we would like to see something with a lot of dashboards and that capability. We would like to see something that has status updates so that, let's say you're a permit applicant and you want to have status updates on where your project is in the process. We'll want to have something that gives you that capability. We'll want to have a lot of reports that are available. Councilman Servadius got a report from Sarah today, and believe it or not, that takes a little bit of time to put together given our current technology. So we would like to have something that can do that a lot easier and a lot more robust. So we want to see a lot of reports coming out of our new system. Public records are obviously a big impact on us, all of us today, and so this will help us with our public records processes because it'll all be electronic, and that will help. Wireless capability in the field is also huge today, so we want to have the ability to have iPads or laptops in the field and have those capabilities for inspectors to be able to work in the field. So in the permitting arena, we would like to support multiple permit types across all agencies. So for instance, Public Works does right-of-way permits and a number of other things. We do building permits and land use permits. We want to have a system that will support all those different functions. We want the ability to accept plans electronically. Now, you might think we do that currently, but we accept them via email, which really does not mean we're accepting them electronically. Typically, you should be accepting them into a system, which can route them all electronically in one main system. So what we do is currently we take them electronically through email, and then we have to route them out to various places. So we want one system to have that one-stop shop kind of a mentality. We want to have the ability to provide online service for customers. I think Councilman Wiesner mentioned that he wanted to have the ability that he's experienced in other towns where he can use his phone and check on a permit from anywhere, and we want to have that ability as well. We want customers to have the ability to track dates of their submittal and the return of their plans. So let's say a set of plans come in and they're routed to another department and then they're routed back. We want to have the ability to track all that, and we want customers to know where their plans are in the process. We don't currently have quite that capability. We'd like to be able to support customizable permits so that we can have different types of permits and be able to maybe manufacture a different type of permit on the fly. We would like to be able to provide electronic workflow notification so that we can notify customers where their project is in the process. And we'd like to be able to allow a customer to see a map of their daily inspections. So let's say a building inspector has 15 inspections that day, and his first inspection might be, let's say it's out on Fort Nugent, and the 15th inspection might be way out on Swantown. And let's say you're the customer that's number 15, you would know that, well, the inspector has 14 inspections to get before they get to you. So you could probably pretty well plan on knowing that they're not going to get to you until the afternoon. So at least you have a good idea of where the inspector is. So we'd like an electronic map of something like that. Then also the inspector would have the ability with electronic results to be able to enter the data into the laptop, send an automatic email to the customer so they would know that they passed or failed the inspection. If there's corrections that they need to fix, it would go out automatically via email. And then it would also upload to the cloud so that the inspector didn't have to come back to the office and download it again into the system. Currently, we use a carbon copy handwritten process. So we're going to upgrade what we do quite a bit through our system.
Thank you, David. So with the help of David Cool and Jim Bridges and Grant Weed's office, we're able to find about 7 cities that have a technology surcharge. I believe we talked about this during the budget process to help, to help fund, the permit software. So looking at these different cities, they vary from, we found a high of 6% to 5% to down to 2%. And also keep in mind that, these surcharges are based on established systems. All the upfront costs have already been paid. These percentages really relate to just, the annual maintenance costs and the support costs and, incremental improvements to the system. So just using a 5% example on what we had budgeted for permit fees in 21 and 22, 5% on top of these budgeted numbers would be about $13,000 in 21 and 22. Of course, it would all depend on what actually comes in, but this is just based on the budget numbers for the applicable permit type fees or permit related type fees, development fees and all that. So we'd like to present the council with some options to discuss and just kick around and then, provide staff with some guidance to go forward with. So there's 2 sets of options. The first set would be the technology surcharge options. And this is not by all means the only options out there. This is just the options that, we happen to have thought of to provide for the workshop today. But, we can go ahead and implement a technology surcharge at 5%, or we can implement one at 10% for the first 3 years and then drop it down to 5%, which would better fund the initial cost of getting it up and running. Or we can just not implement a technology surcharge. There might be other options out there as well. But I was just wondering if this might be a good time to stop and just take some feedback back from the council before we move on to the next set of options on the next slide.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Goldman, for a typical, you listed something, what would probably, do you have any idea what the average cost is per one thing? I mean, if I say 10% and it's going to be an extra $300, that doesn't sound very fair. But if it's an extra 10% and you figure it in and it would be $20, then that's not so bad to get things faster. That would help both sides. So,
I unfortunately,
it's hard to say.
I don't have that average on me, but I mean, I'm wondering do you think, David Cool, do you have anything like that, or do you think it might take a little while to maybe put together?
We'd probably have to work through the numbers a little bit, I think, and come up with something to make it work out that would be fair.
Okay, I mean, I think we should definitely implement something. I would think you should be able to do, since it would mainly be permitting to begin with a survey about, do you currently, where you work or have work or whatever, pay a surcharge for technology? Do you mind sharing that with us? And do you see this of value to be able to have good software to help through projects? I mean, just something, not too taxing, but maybe also to give you some feedback. But I would think we don't have the budget. I think we need to implement something. 10% sounds really high, but I wouldn't be opposed to it if it's not a lot. And I don't even know, other states or what. I mean, we need to be aware of, I guess, trends or what's happening. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to ask Mr. Goldman. I see you have a 2% fee for Woodinville, and I recall when I was there, we had, I think we did a pretty high number of permits and pretty high dollar volume there. So 2% might not seem like a lot, but it resulted, I think, in a pretty hefty total dollar volume. I don't think currently we have a lot of permits or dollar volume that we're running right now. So 2% wouldn't seem like a lot here in our city in Oak Harbor. So a higher number would probably be needed here in Oak Harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would appreciate any information you all can glean from other cities. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, Mayor Pro Tem, my experience on building permit fees, you're talking just a little over 1% of value between plan check fee and building permit fee and plumbing permit fee. And I'm assuming that we're talking about imposing a surcharge upon the actual permit fees, not upon system development charges or impact fees.
No, we can't do that. I checked with legal. No, not we.
Yeah, so if we're talking about, building permit fees, plan check fees, that's where we're going to be charging it at. You're probably not far off with a $300 fee on a $300,000 home if we did it at 10%. My concern, I guess, would be with the developments coming on that we've got coming on that, we start nickel diming these folks and we don't deliver, right? And the reality is right now we're kind of shooting in the dark as to what amount of money are we going to need to maintain such a system. Presently, we've budgeted in the budget the money to purchase the software system. What we're really talking about here is the building up a fund for the ongoing maintenance of that system. Every software has contracts and maintenance and support and upgrades and all those things that we have to do to it. So I'm going to suggest that to staff who's looking for guidance that maybe we take that next little step. You kind of got an idea of the type of money that we're willing to spend on the software system itself, which we've allocated in the budget. We kind of need back from you a little bit as to what's going to be the ongoing cost to maintain that type of a system, right? And we're going to have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. And I was the one who suggested some sort of a surcharge. I know it's common in some of the other cities. And like I've stated before, I think, not speaking for developers, I would think just common sense, they'd be willing to pay extra for that because technology is really going to help them, right? In their development side of things. And obviously this becomes a big help for us too. This becomes a win-win, one of those win-win deals. And, I think they're willing to share in that pain through some sort of a surcharge, but I'd hate to start charging that surcharge and might be not delivering upon that. And who knows how long this process is going to be to find the right software. So my 2 cents, guidance-wise, would be let's continue on. Let's look at software.
let's start looking at generalized costs of maintenance of that software so the council will have some sort of an idea of what we're going to need to come up with on an ongoing budgeting basis. And then we can talk about how we fund that ongoing budgeting basis. And, I still support, I think, a surcharge in some form moving forward once we see some light at the end of the tunnel and once we know what we're delivering and when we're delivering it.
Okay, that helps.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree wholeheartedly with Jim and Beth. Just a couple of comments. Jim is right. I think that, in our experience, people are willing to pay for a certain level of service as long as we deliver that level of service. So as long as we are delivering on that, then I don't think it would be a problem. And obviously it would be difficult to decide until we have a better idea of exactly, what those fees translate to instead of percentages, but into dollars. One idea that I don't like is the higher charge at the beginning. I understand the rationale behind charging more at the beginning to offset the cost and then reducing it. But the problem I see with that is that there might be some bugs in the implementation. And so if we're charging the highest surcharge to the people that are kind of our first guinea pigs in the process, I don't think that would necessarily translate in terms of level of service, because I imagine we're not going to be perfect right away. So, definitely we'll find a way to offset the cost, but I don't think that the highest charge should be at the beginning of the implementation. And that's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
So I just want to be clear here. Councilmember Wiesner said this, and maybe you said it as well, Mr. Goldman. I just didn't hear it. The purpose of this surcharge is for ongoing maintenance of the permitting software?
Well, the purpose of the surcharge can be whatever the direction is from the council. It's customarily for ongoing maintenance because there's an annual cost and there's also some hardware that we need to be getting as well, and hardware replacements and so on, that go along with it. But an idea was we can also help fund the actual initial purchase price of the software as well. $100,000 was allocated in the budget to purchase this, but that was taken out of fund balance. The higher amount was to kind of offset some of the money that was taken out of fund balance to help fund this. So that's just an option to discuss.
And so we're only talking about the permitting software, not the rest of the ERP wagon wheel.
Only the permitting software, correct.
Okay, thank you. So here are my thoughts. We funded the 100,000. Actually, I have a question for Mr. Cool before I jump to my final statement. Mr. Cool, someone needs an inspection done, plumbing, electrical, whatever. Do they still call those in? How does that get communicated to us?
Good question. Currently, the way it's done is someone calls in and they leave a voicemail, and they're able currently to call in the same day, and we'll take the voicemail off the phone and schedule an inspection on the same day. We're probably going to get to the point where we have to take a cut off the day before because we're going to be a little too busy. If we're using an outside vendor to do some of this work, we probably will start cutting that off at 4 o'clock the day before. But that's something we probably need to start doing differently, perhaps online with an electronic system that the new permitting.
So, I'm going to make the suggestion. It was well before your time, but when we and I very heavily was involved with the installation of our phone system 1.5 years ago, whatever it was. I remember we set up a separate phone number for the contractors to call in, and nothing derogatory against anybody or your predecessor, But to me, that seemed incredibly archaic. My suggestion was we have inspections@oakharbor.org as an email address. They email it in, they get a response that says, we got your email, thank you, it's time and date stamped. I'm gonna guess that there are contractors that call in that have poor reception. You may or may not get an accurate message on the voicemail. So I think that's a very low-tech solution that we could implement. Whatever it is, inspections@oakharbor.org, the contractor emails you the night before or up to the morning of, they get an automated response that says, we got your message, thank you, and the inspectors have it right there in front of them. So that's just a thought. I was curious how we're still doing that. I'm not for a technology fee right now. We allocated $100,000. Let's get this thing up and rolling. Let's build some homes and get a whole bunch of revenue rolling in, and then we'll continue to expand the system. I think we owe it to our community to get up to speed on this stuff. I think we're very much behind on technology in a lot of areas. This is a great first step, but I don't know that it sends the right message adding, and I know it may not be a huge dollar amount if you're building a single family home or two, but if you start to build 10, 20, 100, it definitely adds up. Let's get the system in place and get it working. Let's not experiment. I think it would be egregious to take 3%, and that might only be $30 or $300 from somebody, but have it not work. And I'll end with this. I was talking to Sabrina Combs today about our website, or yesterday, maybe I called Sabrina. I was involved with that, and I'm very thankful for all the effort that went into rebranding our website and moving to a new vendor, but it's still fairly lacking. I'm going to be honest. If you go out, and I'll challenge any of you to go pull up the Oak Harbor Municipal Code. And this is nothing, and Sabrina and I have talked about this. Sabrina, if you're listening, I think you're doing a fabulous job. This isn't against you. It's just the way the system was built and the way stuff was brought over from the previous system. And so, and I know she's working very hard on that, as are others. So that's just an example that I want to get this stuff right before we go out and charge any more for it. So let's get the new, whatever system we decide on, especially with regards to permitting, because I think there's massive room for improvement here to take a lot of this stuff digitally and get rid of the paper. It'll speed it up. It'll be more accurate. But I want to get it right and not experiment before we charge anyone anything else. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Mr. Cool for his report. Is really in-depth, very sensible. Mr. Goldman, thank you as well for putting all this together. It's kind of exciting getting all this and coming into this new stuff with software. But I'll tell you, with starting out the meeting and what we talked about, and now we're here, and I'd have a real difficult time supporting a percentage fee surcharge. We don't know exactly what's out in front of us here. We haven't even heard back from vendors. We really don't know the overall cost. So I would be in favor of moving this down the road a few more months, perhaps towards mid-year. In the fall, we have a better idea. And I agree with Councilman Wiesner, is perhaps we need something to have the fingertip data ready for the developers. But at this time, I also agree with Councilman Servadius. This sends the wrong message to the community. We're already asking for more money. We haven't even got the thing started yet. So let's be cautious. Let's get these people in the ground. And when they start coming up with structures, then we'll take another look at this, and then we'll know exactly, we being the council, what we're up against, and we can go for there what we need to approve or disapprove. So thank you guys again for a good report.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. I have the same sentiments as Councilman Servadius. I'm very reluctant at the moment to pick any sort of surcharge without us even knowing what the prices are going to kind of pan out to be. And, you know, Finance Director Goldman had mentioned that the most important part of the success of any new software program is the implementation. And I feel so strongly that we need to have that dialed in. And before we ask anybody for more money, I agree with Councilmember Mack. I don't know if it's sending the right message to the development community when we are. Sounds like our goal is to try and foster an environment that is very collaborative and efficient. And so I just feel that it would not be in our best interest to do that at this moment. And I do have a question that's more overarching of this whole project. I'm totally in the boat of let's get an ERP, let's improve our permitting software, whatever to bring us into the next century or decade technology wise. But I am curious, do we have an idea of who maybe will be the point person or the task force that's going to lead the implementation of these permitting programs? Do we have the manpower in the city? I know all staff already has enough on their plates, and I don't know do we have the capacity as a team to take on a project like this, because it's going to be, you know, a full-time job, I would think, if you do it right.
Well, that's a good question, and that comes to the next set of options I was going to go over on the next slide. So here are some of the software options we could pursue as far as direction from the council, which way to go. And these are not by any means all the options that are out there. This is just something we thought of. So, you know, option one would be to, you know, just pursue the permitting software, which is included in the budget. Number two would be to hire a consultant to pursue the permitting software and the ERP options, or maybe just look at the ERP options and do the permitting software in-house or whatnot. We can, you know, there's other options out there. Or we can just go ahead and start getting all the specs together and go to the street with a RFP for both the ERP and the permitting software, any combination of any of these three.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, that's good.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as, it is a big undertaking. It is going to definitely be a team effort amongst all the, you know, applicable departments, pretty much all the departments. I can't imagine a department not being part of this process, because they're all going to be touching it in one way or the other.
Right.
I've been through a few of these before, you know, in bigger cities. So, you know, bigger cities had more resources to be able to hire temporary 1 or 2 year folks to do this, or hire a consultant to be able to do that. You know, when it comes to Oak Harbor, you know, it might be beneficial to have someone on board to kind of head this up and coordinate between all the departments. But if we can put an effective team together, you know, Sabrina would definitely be part of that, myself, department directors and so on, you know, and other staff members. If we can do that, you know, I think we might be able to get it done. But there's all kind of options out there we can pursue. So, you know, just feel free to discuss and, you know, provide some feedback to us. Yeah, no,
thank you for providing those options. I am looking forward to hearing everyone's discussion, because I think it's definitely a decision that should be extremely well thought out is how we choose to proceed. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilor Goebel. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree that we shouldn't start charging off the bat. You need to make sure that the product works. I'm just excited that Mr. Goldman, you have your sight on the big picture, the 40,000 foot level about, we got to find it. We got to figure out what we want. We got to find it. We have to pay for it. And then we have to keep it going, and people have to take time to learn it. So I'm just saying that I am not opposed to having a surcharge, but the product has to be working well, and I'm guessing it will be a year or longer. before we really have it in hand and people have gotten trained. But I appreciate all the answers that you have. Just in general, when Mr. Cool was talking about how we answer questions about electrical inspection, it seems this software is in the future and will help with eventually all the departments with keeping up and current. But right now, we need to reevaluate how we're communicating. When Cat Kamak was talking about, well, when a permit comes in and it goes through this phase, then the next day we'll hand take it over to the other one. And it's like, it drove me nuts. Why can't we pick up the phone and say, hey, your permit is through this stage, it's going over. We do not have a good, consistent, or friendly system to communicate with our customers. We are in customer service. I know a lot of people just see I have a job, but it's customer service. And just the fact that when someone writes, a staff member or whatever sends an email, and they happen to be either gone for the day for whatever reason, or they're gone for a long weekend, and no reply is given, and the other person's thinking, well, I sent this Wednesday, and this is Friday, and I still haven't heard anything. You feel like you're being ignored, disrespected, just for the fact that they didn't have put into their email answer things. Sorry, I'm out of the office or indisposed or whatever. I will be back on this day, or I will get back. Thank you so much for contacting me. We don't even have a system like that. Mr. Olburn supposedly was supposed to be working on that, but just what we have, we're not consistent at all. So I am very excited for this software option and how much it will help once we learn how to, and eventually have the surcharge. But we've got to get consistent in all departments on acknowledging when somebody contacts us. It's horrifying to have people say, what's the matter with the city? I never hear anything back. You all are just a bunch of blah, 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 blah. So anyway, just a comment, and we know it's the blah, 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 blah. Thank you.
Yeah, don't type it in.
Okay, Councilor Heisen?
Thank you, Mayor. That is horrifying to hear the blah, blah, blah. I've heard very good things about our planning department and permitting, so for whatever it's worth. In terms of the implementation, like a steering committee, or getting the legwork required to get this thing off the ground, I definitely think that we need to pursue both the ERP and permitting software. We need the whole meal deal. I don't want to piece this together, after the fact. So I want to volunteer to help however I can. During my many years as a technical copywriter, I worked almost exclusively with big software companies and wrote about the implementation of ERP and CRM software. So I'm intimately acquainted with how it works and how it's implemented and what the benefits are. So if you do end up with some kind of a committee or group, please tap me for that. I'm happy to help in absolutely any way that I can. And I appreciate that this is going to be a big undertaking, and I really appreciate staff's willingness to add this to their workload. I think it'll really pay off in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that concludes our comments and input regarding the ERP overview. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council. We'll then move to the last item on our agenda today, City Administrator Report. Mr. Oborn.
I just want to highlight, first of all, the collaboration between departments and staff tonight. Combined presentations and such were handled very efficiently, and certainly appreciate that. And certainly my last report here, hopefully it'll be brought up by somebody for me. So collaboration is something that really appreciated. And so if you noticed, quite different report here for a city administrator's report, and I certainly appreciate the collaboration. And as I'm waiting for the 1 second here to bring up the presentation, thank you, Lisa, in the background there, for bringing up the presentation here. So new year, new look, our new format is kind of what our theme is here. And so in metrics, not matrix, I've said it wrong. So metrics is certainly giving you data and having it in better format is a goal here. And so we took our prior month data here and put it into a report and captured a lot of information that was already out there in various areas, and just trying to combine it into one administrator's report where you can see a real snapshot of all various city functions and have data available for you. So certainly helps you on the decision making and knowing the activities that are going on in the city. So, and then we also added boards and commission and committee agendas in there from prior months, so you can kind of see quickly what those other sub-organizations or commissions are doing and kind of track their topics too. So moving on to the next slide here is just kind of focusing on the first area, which is the administrator's report. Still continue to give you highlights here of what's going on in the city, kind of breaking it up into categories and city projects, support services, our community support, economic development, and leadership. These are areas that were in the past report and will continue in here. A lot of economic recovery and communication information provided here by our PIO. A lot of good capture here, utilizing some of the state numbers on economic recovery data, so you can kind of see where we're going, and we'll continue to do that. And also, we talked about earlier here with the CARES funding, the report from Civic. All of a sudden, my mind breaks down here, our Sin City report information there. So moving on, kind of the next section in the report is development services. This is kind of a different format of a previous report that came out and was emailed to you directly. And so we're trying to consolidate reports. Unfortunately, we're still kind of doing it manually, but we're trying to consolidate 3 reports into one report, and also we got columns in here where we can drill in, and hidden columns in here where we can drill in and have more tracking on project management. So so hopefully this is very helpful to you to kind of see what the status of the projects in the city and see where we're moving there. So, and then also in information data was talked about earlier there from development services, and so we'll continue to look at ways to give you that monthly data in a concise and easy to read format. This is on page 84 if you're kind of following along in your report. So, and then going on to the different departments, fire department is the next one, is just quick summary here of kind of what's going on, taking some of the existing report and just capturing it in a smaller executive format there. And moving on to finance, just kind of sharing some information with the budget process here. There was some question here about positions, and so we clearly, this will be in the final budget as we get it printed, but just to give you what we already approved right now, Finance Director felt that it would be very helpful to you to have a position control or position report here, so we included that in this monthly report. And then on to human resources, has a lot of good stats in there, and you can see some of their reports, and some of the NeoGov and such does some nice jobs of seeing on the hiring and seeing some of the things going on in the HR world. And then even we're a very diverse city. Our city attorney kind of reminds us, so we're one of 2 cities with a marina, so we're kind of giving you some of the stats and overviews and some of the information that goes to the Marina Advisory Committee and giving this to the council, so you can see some of the things of our occupancy rate and our monthly revenue, and fuel sales is a major source of revenue out there at the marina. So moving on, police departments, just kind of a snapshot on arrest reports. So once again, like I said, these are data that were already there. We're just kind of capturing it in a monthly format for you. And then moving on, Public Works. I think this is a good addition of a lot of areas. They had a lot of areas already being captured, and so we were able to work with staff and really enhance some stats here on activities, where we're working and what we're doing in Public Works. So good information there. And then lastly, but not leastly, Senior Services. Some good capture of some of their indicators there with memberships and that's kind of going down a little bit, but we do still have people joining and some of the other things. And certainly if we ever when we get back, I shouldn't say if we ever, when we get back up running. So we'll have more of the travel and additional information in there. So lastly, I guess this is a working document. It's to help the council and communicate with the council. So certainly your input is welcome and desired. And if we can tweak things different or provide additional information, we'll continue to work this information and provide you the information that is helpful to keep you informed as a city council. Any questions?
A lot to look at there, that's for sure. I think that the idea is to make that a little bit more concise, but a lot of information. So, Councillor Heisen.
Just quickly, I love this presentation so much. I love the charts and the graphs and the visuals. It's really fantastic. It helps break it down and really enhance your reports. So thank you so much. That was great.
We talk about these things at weekly department head meetings, and sometimes maybe take them for granted a little bit, but I think getting more of this information passed along to council is really important. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the IRTPO meeting today, and during the roundtable portion of it, he announced that for the first time ever in the state of Washington, they have gotten rid of a contractor that's been working on that bridge, I think for almost 3 years. So when they legally get everything settled, they have someone else to go into place, and they will begin new work, and supposedly they will let the elected officials know. But I thought it was unusual to hear that they had to let a contractor go for the first time with WashDOT in the state. Anyway, and the new person will come in and take down everything, the equipment and stuff that was put up that is freaking out some of the drivers and the truck drivers that go across there and stuff like that. The other kind of roundtable announcement is in February. I'm sorry, I didn't write down the dates before this. The Navy is doing a security exercise, and usually when that happens, there are backups on different roads and circles and things like that, and so please be patient. It may not be as bad as other years since a lot of people are working from home. So those were two items that were announced at that meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, seeing then no further business, I think we'll call this adjourned. Thank you very much, council, and thank you, citizens out there. We'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.